You're listening to the Limitless Leadership Podcast, the podcast designed to help automotive repair shops learn how to lead, coach, train, and manage their team better by sharing proven techniques and thought-provoking interviews from industry leaders. Are you ready to transform your leadership skills by tapping into unrecognized potential to achieve limitless results? Let's get ready for liftoff. It's time to go from great to greater. Here's today's episode.
All right, leaders, whether you're running a shop, leading a team, or leveling up in your career, you know details matter. And if you're like me, that includes keeping your beard on point. That's why I trust the Bearded Brotherhood. Their beard oils, beard balms, and mustache waxes, among other, are made with all natural ingredients, no junk, no shortcuts, just top-tier quality that keeps my beard looking sharp and feeling great. And let's talk scents. Whether it's their best-selling Woodsman or my personal favorite, Lone Stranger, the Bearded Brotherhood keeps me smelling fresh and my beard stays soft all day. If you take your beard game seriously, this is the stuff that you need. And because you're part of the Limitless Leadership podcast family, I've got a deal for you. Just visit thebeardedbrotherhood.co/lead15 to grab your favorite products and get 15% off in the process, because a great leader deserves a great beard. Now, back to today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Limitless Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Parnell. Before we get started, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to this podcast. And if you like what you hear, and I know that you will, please leave a review, because the more reviews we have, the more this show gets pushed out, and it allows us the opportunity to reach people and build leaders. And speaking of leaders, I'm joined today by a leader. Yes, you are, Mike. You're a leader. I'm joined today by our guest, a great guest. He's a third-generation shop owner, a multi-unit shop owner, a car fix in the Carolinas, a Tar Heel fan. I learned that today. And he's a podcast host of a great podcast called Confessions of a Shop Owner. Our guest today is Mike Allen. Mike, thanks for being here, man.
What's up, man? I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And Confessions of a Shop Owner. So fairly new. It's a startup podcast, as you shared, but I have listened to, I think, every episode now, and fantastic podcast that you have going. I love the fun banter, just talking about anything and everything. And today we're going to be doing that and more. But why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience and tell us all the things that we need to know about Mr. Mike Allen.
Oh, man. I just enjoy talking to other shop owners and small business people around the country about, life, liberty, and the pursuit of automotive nirvana. The podcast is really an extension of that. We just have a lot of fun at training events and conferences, in the networking opportunities, in and around the restaurants and bars after classes over. The classes are great, right? But the networking, I think, is the real meat and potatoes of those events. So if you go to these events, don't just go back to your hotel room. Go down to the lobby, go to the restaurant, link up with some people, make some friends. But that's kind of been a defining part of my journey through the automotive sector. I was very fortunate. I think you said that I'm a third generation. My father was heavily involved in the independent garage owners of North Carolina. And so when I came into the family business back in, the late 90s, early 2000s, I would go to meetings with him kind of against my will. But he really helped me realize how much value there is in those types of events and those types of relationships, so that you're not out there by yourself on an island trying to do this thing that we do. You don't have to do it alone. You can have peers that you can lean upon for help.
That's so good. And that's the importance of 20 groups. And I love the fact that networking, as you just shared, you're kind of highlighting really why you're going to these events. Yes, there's amazing classes. There's great training. But what we know is that 70% of what you get one day is going to be forgotten tomorrow, and 90% will be forgotten in a week. But the memories that you're creating at the networking events, those are the things that are going to last a lifetime. And those friendships and relationships that you're creating as well, not only last a lifetime, but it also helps you professionally too. So can you talk about the importance of networking in a way where you have other people who are doing the same thing you're doing, going through the same grind you're going through, and you're learning because of them?
Well, yeah. So there are a couple of ways to look at it. I know that like when ASTA, the trade association I'm involved so heavily with, when we go into a new market or a market where we don't have a big footprint, we start talking to shop owners. We're kind of cold calling. We're walking in the door, introducing ourselves, and these guys are in the middle of it. And, they're super busy, and that can be a hard conversation sometimes, right? And what do you mean you want me to talk to other shop owners, and they feel like other shop owners are competition,
Yeah.
and they can't give away their secret sauce, or they're going to try to steal from them, or they're going to try to recruit from them, or whatever it might be. And when you realize that there's more cars out there than I can fix, there's enough cars out there to go around. We don't have to be competition. We can help each other out.
Yep.
And so if you're not yet comfortable being friends with the other shop owners in your town, I would challenge you to be uncomfortable and develop those relationships. But there are also relationships available with other shop owners who live that same struggle online, in free groups online, and then also in 20 groups around the country. And those 20 groups, they're not free, but they do come with a higher level of sharing and a higher level of accountability, that there's a lot of value in that. But don't do this alone. Go out and find a group of peers that are like-minded, that are in the same stage of maturity of their business, if that's what you want, that work on the same type of vehicles, and help each other out. You don't have to be on an island. This can be great.
It's collaboration and not competition. And those groups that you're talking about, they're priceless. And you're right, there is an investment, but with any investment, there is an ROI, and your ROI with these kind of groups is truly priceless. You mentioned that you're on a board, or you mentioned that you're a part of a group, ASTA. You're also on the board as the president of the board of the ASTA. Can you explain what the ASTA is for our audience listening who doesn't know the ASTA?
Yeah. So ASTA is only about 4 years old right now. It stands for Automotive Service and Tire Alliance, but it was born from the merger of two trade associations that have been around for over 50 years. Pushing up 70 years. Independent Garage Owners of North Carolina and the North Carolina Tire Dealers Association. And we had grown to the point, if a lot of your listeners maybe have come to one of our trade show events, the ASTA Expo, or it used to be ASTE. It's had a dozen different names over the last 30 years, right? But we had people from all over the country. We had people from Canada and Mexico and England and New Zealand and Australia. So really, we're not North Carolina anymore. So when we merged, we took North Carolina out of the name, and we exist to serve the independent aftermarket. That's auto repair and tires. So I enjoy kind of pulling others into the fold and helping them realize, like we just talked about, you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah.
And how much fun it can be if you have friends who have the same experience. I've certainly felt that going out to dinner with a friend group, and nobody in the friend group is an entrepreneur. Nobody in the friend group is in the auto industry. Going out with my wife's friend set, and they're all in the same trade. And so they all have lots to talk about. And I'm just kind of sitting around, so you don't have to do that for your whole life. You can go talk. You can go make your spouse be that person sitting around doing this, because everybody else knows about it.
It can definitely feel like you're on an island. I like that kind of analogy that you're providing. It can feel like you're on an island. And the term that keeps coming to mind as you're sharing this is an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset. Can you describe, either in your own personal life or someone that what kind of exponential growth they experienced when they finally got out there, put themselves out there, got vulnerable, got transparent, and really entered into this abundance mentality versus scarcity mentality by entering into a networking group or a group of some kind like that?
So, I mean, the number of examples are enormous, right? But without naming names, because you don't want to talk about someone without their permission, but
sure,
there is a small shop owner in North Carolina who was a mobile tech, 2 years ago, and he bought a rundown, beat up building in a tough market, and he immediately got a business coach and immediately started joining some of these online forums and identified, because that's one of the things about the forums is you got to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff, who's just pulling your leg and who's giving true advice.
Sure.
But he was discerning enough to make those connections, right? And he took the advice and took action immediately. Like, he didn't mess around with excuses or reasons or him and hawing or I'll do it next week. He's an action taking guy. And so a year in, he's totally cleaned up this building, paved the lot, painted it, put in more equipment. He's done very good revenue for himself and one other person. He's hired additional people. And I mean, he's going to blow the doors off this year. And I would say he's at a point right now that most startup single operator shop owners don't get to for a decade. And it's because he didn't do it on his own. He wasn't so prideful and ego-centered to think that he knew it all. Yeah. He knew that he didn't know, and he sought out that information.
Love that. Yeah. You said a key phrase, and that's taking action. And we know that knowledge without action is just information. And when you can step out and actually take action and do the things that are being discussed, that's where real growth really tends to happen. You mentioned Facebook groups and other groups out there. I think what you failed to mention is that during the week it's all serious, but there's one particular day, Friday, where it goes off the rails.
So that's one group in particular, and I feel like we can name it. Kieran wouldn't mind, but it's Auto Shop Owners Hangout.
Great group, by the way. I enjoy that group.
Well, and I mean, so it was. I feel like it was a month ago or so, there was a group of us that all just decided to put joke posts up at the same time. And it wasn't coordinated. It just happened kind of organically. And all of these posts got 100, 150 comments. And they were about half and half people who didn't realize that they were satire. And it got to the point that this group was going to implode. And so we had to say, all right, guys, look, let's behave ourselves. Friday at lunchtime through Sunday, we can have joke posts. But Monday through Friday at lunch, we're actually going to be serious and talk about business.
It's gotten to be such a thing that you even had an entire podcast episode on this topic. So let's segue into your podcast, which is Confessions of a Shop Owner, or an evil shop owner, as you will refer to yourself at times. So if you're watching this episode, or if you're listening to this episode, I encourage you to watch the episode. This is on YouTube at The Bearded Leader. You can find all the episodes and more. But let's talk about your podcast, Confessions of a Shop Owner. Talk about what it is and really what the purpose is for it.
So it was born of a series of Friday night Zoom calls that I would host randomly. If I got home and I didn't have plans for Friday evening, 7:00, I'd fire up a Zoom meeting and I'd post it on all the Facebook groups. And just whomever wants to get on. We'll talk shop. We'll talk about, whatever we want to talk about. Sometimes it's very technically focused. Sometimes it's management. Sometimes it's sales. A lot of times it's ethics. Sometimes it's total unrelated BS, right? A lot of laughter, a lot of calling people out for, if they're, full of it or whatever else. And it's all in good fun, but it has really turned into this thing where I'll log on at 7:00 at night and it'll be mostly East Coasters, right? Who are home. And then you'll get some central time zone people who are maybe buttoning up at the shop, and you'll see they're at the shop. And then a couple hours later, you get Mountain Time and West Coasters who are just closing up their shop and going home. And the next thing you know, it's 1:00 in the morning, and we've been on for 5 or 6 hours, and we've probably had 50 or 75 different people all come in for an hour or 2 hours, and then filter back out, and that's okay. And the conversation is just great, and it goes all over the place, and invariably people will be like, they'll be commenting on it in the groups the following day. And I get calls and messages. Hey, did you record it? I really want to listen to that conversation. It's like, no, what happens on Friday night stays on Friday night. But what I can do is kind of bring that energy and that style of conversation to somewhere they know they are being recorded, and that's what kind of turned into Confessions of a Shop Owner, because that's what Friday night has been. It's been a confessional for me because, look, I've been doing this for 20 years and I still screw up a lot. So this is kind of my therapy to share what I did wrong and what should I have done differently and what did I learn from it. And, and it with a bit of humor too, right? If you can't laugh at yourself, then what else are you going to do?
Sure. Mike, I think that, we can connect through authenticity, humility, and vulnerability. And I think it takes a lot of strength for people to recognize that vulnerability is actually a strength, and being able to recognize that, hey, I don't know it all. I'm going to keep on messing up. You've been a shop owner for help me out, well over a decade, correct?
Well, yeah. So I started buying shares from my father 9 years ago. So I've
Okay.
been working in the family business since 2001. I started buying my father out 9 years ago and have completely done that now, and then started opening additional shops.
So been working in the business for over 20 years, been a shop owner, multi-unit shop owner, as we discussed, but you're also sharing like, hey, I make mistakes, I don't have all the
Big
answers.
ones.
And that's the thing. I think we all do. We all are learning every day. And when we're committing to being a lifelong learner, it's going to require some vulnerability and some humility and authenticity on our part so that we can connect with our team. If you've listened to this podcast before, you've heard me say, till I'm blue in the face, I'll say connection creates engagement and engagement increases performance. And many of us as business owners, as shop owners, we're wanting to increase our performance, which subsequently increases our revenue, but that's the end in mind. And if we can shift from the end in mind to what's gonna get us there, I believe it's going to be the connection that we're creating with our team, which subsequently increases engagement and then performance. But I want to segue back to your podcast, Mike. Confessions of a Shop Owner. Since this is a leadership podcast, I'll ask you any confessions from a leadership perspective, any leadership lessons that you've learned over the years where you can share, hey, I used to do this, but now I do this, and I've seen a lot of benefit because of the change.
Is this like a Joe Rogan 3.5 hour long form podcast?
Come on, man. We got all day.
No, I mean, so there's a long list, right? I would tell you that most recently, I have, in the last year, I've turned over a lot of really high quality individuals who work for my company that don't work for me anymore. And it's not because they did something wrong. It's because they chose not to stay on board with the changes that I was making. I went to a 6-day work week, which we switched to a 4-day work schedule for the staff, but we're open 6 days. And so that means you got to work on some Saturdays, right?
Sure.
And we switched to having a dedicated team of individuals that do the DVI and the write-up and the estimating. And so some very high performers who do really good write-ups and DVIs and estimating, taking that off their plate, they feel like you're taking away my ability to earn a living, right? And I understand where their concern was coming from, and it did not work perfectly at first. It still doesn't work perfectly, like nothing does, but we're seeing the results now. But in the process of the pain of the changes and the growth, I lost an ops manager. I lost a shop foreman. I lost a high level diagnostician. And, that's okay. I think they're all going to do great. They're all going to be rock stars wherever they end up. And I'd like to think that, if I run into them in the grocery store, we shake hands and have a good conversation.
Sure.
But my methodology of explaining the whys of these changes and how it was going to benefit our customers and them and the company as well. Clearly, I failed in that, because if I had communicated clearly with them and made believers of them on the why, then I wouldn't have lost them, right?
When the why is clear, the how is easy.
Yeah. So the fact that I lost them tells me that I didn't communicate well, or that I didn't cast the vision appropriately. So
we know that poor communication is costing shop owners 18% of total salaries being paid out on an annual basis. So you just mentioned one of the greatest and probably the greatest challenge that we often see, not just in this industry, but across any organization. Communication is usually at the root of a lot of the challenges. In fact, let's stay in this industry for a moment. Think about any negative reviews that you've had at your shop. I would venture to guess that 90% of them probably boil down to communication or lack thereof.
It's almost always failure of communication at one step along the path, or multiple failures to follow process. If it gets to the point where it's a bad review, more than one person had to drop the ball for it to get to that point, because you have checks and balances built into the system to keep it from getting to that point. So yeah, I mean, I think something that we talk about when I talk with my children, right? As they're growing up, I've got a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 10-year-old. We're talking about character and ethics and integrity and, those conversations. And we have the same conversations internally in the company about, every time something goes off the rails, it could have been addressed or it should have been addressed with clear communication between the right people.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes an asteroid falls out of the sky and knocks a hole in a car, but that's pretty rare. Usually we cause the problem when it falls apart because we didn't follow our known processes.
Mike, our kids are around the same age. We have 4 kids, 13, 12, 11, and 8. And so if you're like me, prayer and alcohol can get you through any day. And that's been kidding, not kidding. So, but let's go back to what you just mentioned. You mentioned that you lost 3 or 4, or a handful of really solid team members when you made these changes. First, I want to say props to you for going through that change, because many of us, like I call it the J curve, where we start on the lower end of the J and we think that we're going to go from here. If you're listening, again, watch the episode, but I have my hand up. We're going to go from here to here, but inevitably we typically go through this J curve and there's this dip, and many of us quit in the dip. You didn't quit in the dip. You lost some team members in the dip, but you didn't quit in the dip. What advice would you give to the shop owner who is wanting to make changes because they recognize the need, but they're afraid to lose team members? What advice would you give to that person to say, keep going through it and you're going to grow through it as well?
That's the first time I've ever heard that J curve analogy. That's a great analogy. I think it really does illustrate kind of the experience. I think it comes down to a base level of believing in yourself and believing in the vision that you've cast. Even if I failed to communicate it well and to cast the vision in a way that the rest of my team could all get on board with it, I didn't doubt myself and I didn't doubt the destination. And so, it hurt and caused some concern when you lose a key player and then another key player, right?
Yeah.
But you know what? If I were in a super rural area and I would be more concerned, but I'm in a pretty densely populated metro area. There's enough strong cats out there,
Yeah.
Guys that have been at shops that are open 4 and 5 days a week and never have to work on the weekends. I get it. You don't want to work on the weekends, but there are tons and tons and tons of men and women who work 7 days a week or work at businesses that are open 7 days a week or 6 days a week and have no problem with that because it's what they know and what they're used to. So I had a former technician comment on a thread the other day and said, "You're going to lose good people if you open on Saturdays." And, it was a little passive aggressive towards me, and I get it. And I said, "Dude, you're 100% right. You know that I've lost good people. You're one of them." I said, "But there are good people who are okay with working on Saturdays too. And and you're going to be fine where you are. You're going to find an awesome place. And I already know that guy is very happy where he is. Great. And I'll find somebody who's happy with our organization." So it'll be all right.
You made a good point too, Mike, in regards to, and now, I mean, I think it probably, whether you're in a rural area or a densely populated area, I think you can create and cast a vision clear enough to where your team can help drive the mission towards the vision. However, you're in a pretty good and unique situation in a sense of you have more runway to try things and potentially fail at things and see what works and see what doesn't work. You're able to throw more things against the wall to see if they stick. Here's a thought I want to throw your way. And that is, I personally, as a leadership coach myself, and something I do with a lot of clients is I work on with the owner, they're casting the vision. My personal belief is that your team is the one who is creating the actual mission statement and driving the mission towards that vision. What I see in most situations, not just this industry, but every organization, most situations, the mission statement was created by the owner. And when the vision got cast, the 1 or 2 people created the mission statement. And then now the belief needs to get shifted to the team in regards to what the mission is. And what I coach people on is you as an owner can cast the vision, but get your team involved with the creation of the actual mission, because they're the ones boots on the ground driving the mission towards your vision. You can properly and clearly explain the why, which makes the how. The how is the mission. the why is the vision. And so it makes the how easier to get to the vision because your team is doing it. And so even when we're at the Fueling Connections event in April, I'll run through a mission statement creation exercise with the entire group on what it looks like to get your team involved. Because when people start believing in something that they created, buy-in is inevitable. You don't need to capture buy-in because they've already bought in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mike, if I were to ask you, so leadership podcast, what does leadership mean to you? What answer would you give me?
I think leadership is, like, if you distill it down to its most pure form, it's influence, right? It's the ability to create followers, willful followers. Because I can tell somebody we're going to be open on Saturdays, and they'll come to work until they find their next job, and then they stop coming to work. I'm experiencing this in real time, right? Or I can cast the vision about why Saturdays are better, and then I'm going to have people who are excited about it. And so I've got that also happening. I've got people who are crushing it, right? We're breaking records, but we're breaking records with some new people. And so I would say that leadership is influence. It's the ability to create followers.
What does your journey look like personally in your realm of influence? Being able to start out years ago as a new shop owner, even being in the business for a long time, but you're a new shop owner, you're trying to gain influence and create more influence to create more followers, if you will, and grow and develop your people in the process. What does your journey look like in terms of where you were then compared to where you are now?
I'm very fortunate in that my father started with business coaching and having a coach and being part of a 20 group when I was a teenager. And so I got to see his development in that process. And that's one of the things that you're going to get if you have a good business coach or you're part of a good 20 group, is you're going to get training, encouragement, and accountability on leadership development for yourself and for the leaders in your organization.
Yeah.
And so, shameless plug, I love Elite Worldwide. That's a one-on-one coach with them. And also I'm in their 20 group process. It's called Pro Service. But they've had very intentional over the years. They have a different thing they focus on each year, right? But they have a very intentional focus on leadership development for owners and understanding that you can't just be a boss, right? You can't just say, do this because I said so, because I signed the checks.
Yeah.
I get it. There was a generation maybe where that worked to a degree, but communication styles and motivations have all evolved. And if our leadership doesn't evolve along with that, then we're going to get left in the dust, wondering why we can't hire anybody.
Yeah. 100%.
Can't find good people. There are good people out there, man. They're just somewhere else. So,
sure. You mentioned Elite, another episode you had recently on your podcast. You had Matt Lofton, your coach, and which was a great episode. It kind of felt like you're walking through an actual coaching call on a podcast episode. So if you're listening and you're considering getting a coach, but you're not sure who to go with or where to go, again, I'm a big believer in collaboration and not competition. If Limitless Leadership is not for you, there are definitely other companies out there like Elite and like others that we know of. I'd encourage you to listen to that episode, which I believe is episode 10. Help me out.
So I do one with Matt once a month. It's literally,
okay.
So the concept there is literally I'm opening the books for my smallest store.
Okay.
And we're just doing coaching calls once a month, and we record it, and it's exactly what they do in their coaching organization. And so you see the numbers and you see the staff issues and the hiring and the recruiting and the goal setting and everything else. So
yeah, love it.
That's exactly what that was. That's why it sounded like it was an actual coaching call, because it was.
It was it was definitely a cool thing. Very good. Okay. So, what else? Here's a question. So I asked this question to every guest that I have on the podcast, and that is best advice you've ever received from a coach or a mentor.
So I'll give you two. The first one is from my dad, and he got it from his grandfather, or from his dad, my grandfather. And it was, it's your little red wagon. You can push it or pull it. So what does that mean? The choices that you make and the work that you put in now can lead to an easy life now and a hard life later, or a harder life now and an easy life later. So are you gonna push a wagon? If you ever tried to push a wagon, it goes all over the place. You got no direction. It works really well when you pull it. So put in the work now so that you can have the enjoyment later. And the other one is straight from my grandfather. And it was talking about, and his point was ethics in business. Just, essentially just tell the truth, and everything else takes care of itself. Cars break enough on their own. You don't have to make stuff up. But the saying was, you can shear a sheep a dozen times. It will thank you for the service, but you can only slaughter it once. So
you can shave a sheep.
Shear. Yeah.
Oh, shear. Okay. Yeah. You can shear a sheep a dozen times. It will thank you for the service. You can slaughter it once. Both great analogies, the wagon and the sheep. Great analogies. Love that. All right, Mike, any parting words for the audience? Anything else you want to share?
No, I'm excited to see you at Fuel and Connections for ASTA in April. If you want to know more details about it, I'm sure you can reach out to Josh and find some information. You can find me on social media, or you can go to astausa.org, and the event details are there. But it's going to be in Morrisville, North Carolina. I'll be there. Josh will be teaching. Lola Schmidt of Schmidt Auto Care will be teaching. And there will be lots of good, fun conversation after class and the networking events too. So I hope that all of your listeners can join us there.
As do I. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate you for being on, man.
Absolutely.
All right. And thank you for joining us once again. As you know, every episode, we look to transform our leadership skills by tapping into unrecognized potential to achieve limitless results. So thanks again for tuning in to the Limitless Leadership Podcast. Have a great day, everyone. Don't forget to smile today. Tell your loved ones how much they mean to you. I'm Josh Parnell, reminding you to keep leading well.